So at the moment, when we make matches in our game, the gems simply disappear and then new ones fall into position. But we want to make this look a little bit more interesting with a little effect to appear when the items are destroyed, so a little explosion effect. So we're going to do that using the particle system of Unity. So I'm going to stop this running here, and I'm going to, in my hierarchy here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to create an effects particle system. And we're going to call this gem burst, and we'll do the blue one first of all. We're going to start off using. Now, the particle system in Unity is really, really handy for using for things like this especially. There's lots of cool things we can do with them. It's definitely something that I recommend that you play around with and try out different values and see what kind of fun things you can do with it. But I'm just going to step through creating one simple particle effect and showing the variables that we're going to use to set that up. So to start off with, we've got this very simple circle particles emitting here. I'm going to turn the rotation here to 0, so we start blasting outwards. I'm going to change this particle, the graphic we have for the particle here. In the asset pack, in the materials, we have some different particles here. Most importantly, we have a shard particle effect. So this is just a material specially set up for using with our particle effects. You can see if we go here, the way this is set up, if you go to particles and standard over here, you can assign a graphic to this. That won't work very well for what we want to have in action here. So what you then need to do is switch it back to sprites and default. So you can't assign a graphic to this, but you can maintain the one that you assigned in the particle effect. It's a weird workaround to make this appear in 2D for us the way we want it to. So I'm going to grab this shard particle material, and down the bottom of our gem burst effect in the renderer, we're going to put this into this slot for material here, and now we have a slightly more interesting looking effect here. And then what we're going to do is start making this work better for our effect. So we want to go to shape here, and I'm going to change it from cone to a circle, and I'm going to change the size of this to 0.25 because we want it to be pretty small, that it appears roughly the size of a gem. If I grab just a gem to drop in here, this blue one here for example, just as a little reference point for us. You can see we have this here. Obviously we don't want these flying all over the place like this. So we also don't want them to be constantly pouring out. We want them to burst out in one big blast. So if we go to emission on our gem and change it from rate over time 10 to 0, and then in bursts here, hit the plus and say count is, we're going to say 25. You can see what that does is it'll make these appear and they'll fly out. They'll fly out really, really far. We don't really want them to do quite that much, and there's a long time between these bursts. Now, at the moment, it's set to last for 5 seconds and looping is turned on. We're going to make sure that we turn off looping before we finish working with this. But for now, we want to leave that playing just so we can keep seeing our effect happening. But I am going to change the duration down to just 1 second. And I'm going to change the lifetime here to 1 as well. Actually, no, we're going to make this a random number. Random between two constants. So between 0.3 of a second and 0.7. So it'll make them disappear at different times. So we're already starting to get things a little bit more interesting. We're going to put our start speed down much smaller, so it's just in a tiny area around our little gem. Our start size, we're going to change this to be random between 2 as well, and this is going to be between 0.2 and 0.5. so these are all values obviously that I've worked out beforehand. These are things that again, I recommend that you play around with them, but these are settings that I found work pretty well for what we want here. Then I'm going to get the start rotation and put that between two numbers as well, between 0 and 360. So now we've got a bit of variety in our objects. Then most important thing is changing the color here. So I'm going to go random between two colors, and I'm going to pick a nice kind of blue and a slightly darker blue, like so. So now it looks a bit more suitable for our gem. This blue could be a bit different as well, actually. There we go. It fits in a bit more with our gem that we have there. Okay, so that's all perfectly fine. One other thing we want to do is make sure when we have stop action here, we're going to switch this to be destroy. So that what that means is when the particle effect finishes playing, it'll destroy the object from the scene. So basically what we're going to have happen is whenever our gem gets destroyed, we create a copy of the particle effect, and then it'll destroy itself when the 1 second duration passes by. Okay, so that's the basics of this section of it, but at the moment our little particles are just kind of disappearing all of a sudden. So we don't really want that to happen. So if we go down here, you can add a little check beside size over lifetime. I'm going to expand this down, and I'm going to, if you click on this little graph here, you can change this. So at the moment by default it starts small and gets big. We want to do the opposite of that, so I'm going to select one of these other defaults down here. So now it'll be big and they kind of fade down to small, which is perfect. And then I'm also going to change rotation over lifetime here. I'm going to put this between two constants, and we're going to say between 360 and minus 360. So now these little things spin away and look like they're something interesting happening. And there you go. That's our very simple particle effect for this gem. So let's make this a prefab. So let's go to our prefabs folder. I'm going to create one, or create a new folder called effects, like so. And then we're going to drag our gem burst into there. And then we're going to create a few more copies for us to use. So for each of our gems, basically we want to have one. So let's duplicate this 4 times. And we're going to rename this to each color. So we've got red, green, yellow, and purple. That is all the right colors, right? Yes, it is. Confused myself for a second. And then let's assign some colors to these. Basically, the main change we want to do for this is just assigning different colors. We got our green, which we'll put over here. Change the color of all these bits and bobs. So it's pretty straightforward to do this bit. As I said, it's mostly just adjusting the colors slightly. And finally, purple. I do want to make sure that that's the right kind of purple actually. So let's just pop this in here. Where did I put that? Boop. Let's move it a bit closer. Go a bit lighter with it. There we go. Okay, perfect. So there's our 4 variants created. We need to assign them as prefabs, of course. So let's drag them in here as prefab variants. So if we want to make any changes, we only have to make a change to one of them. And the only difference between them should be all the colors. So then we'll remove these particle effects, and we need to make them spawn in the game.